Okay, so if, I really want you all to share experiences and things that could be helpful to the class, and also some questions that you might have. You may have some very serious issues. Let me just try to make a statement here. It's very important. This statement is, I do not expect you to agree with everything I come up with in this class, okay? There's all kinds of variety of opinions out there. You will come out, especially when we get to contextualization. This is the hot button that people have taken sides. And at times they become there's kind of bitter recriminations verbally going back and forth. And we'll explain that. So you may come out on one side that's quite different from me. I mean, I have a reason for where I am on that spectrum of contextualization. It may not be where you are or where you want to experiment. So please understand, I'm not trying to put you into a mold that everybody's going to walk out of this class saying this is it. There's got to be flexibility. Also, I want to say that different country, cultural, religious settings will be unique. And so one will take a very different path to get to it than one that might be appropriate in Bangladesh. So everything about contextualization is the context of the situation in which you find yourself, okay? So that's the flexibility that we understand in this class. And so if someone here is taking a position they feel pretty strongly about, but say it in love, of course, and someone else is kind of really disagreeing, I mean, let's do all this with love and understanding that we come from different places, we come from different backgrounds. But, I mean, there's commonality among us. We're all evangelicals. And so that's how we'll proceed. Okay, so now you can follow along in your computers. I think, say, 3/4 of the class have computers. And if you don't have, that's fine. Then, just most of you are very well acquainted where the Muslim world is, but over 90% Muslim we're looking at here is in the dark green. So it includes this North Africa, Middle East. Saudi Arabia, you may wonder why it's not over 90%. It's because of foreign workers, of which there are many Christians working in Saudi. The more menial tasks, that would be the huge amount of, say, Christian workers in Saudi would be menial workers, or non-Muslims of some type. They could be Hindus from India or Buddhist or whatever. That's why it wouldn't be there. Then the next 50 to 90% Muslim. So we get across the rest of North Africa, moving into the Sahara Desert here. And then 10 to 50% Muslim is down in here. It's been interesting to read the life history of Roland Bingham. Roland Bingham was our founder of our mission in the late 1800s. And what a man of God who went out, and everybody, all the missionaries are dying all around him. His first 2 missionaries went out with him, died, and buried in Africa. And just to see the harshness of what they had to put up with back in the late 1800s and early 1900s. But the point of SIM was to try to have a belt at the lower side of the Sahara Desert. They knew the Muslims were going to come down over the desert and try to keep moving south into the very bottom part of Africa here. And they felt if they had a successful group of Christians across here, because most of these people were animists at this point, south of the Sahara. So we built these mission stations around here and to try to counter that problem. So this is just one view of the Kazakhs, the different stans up here, and then India and Pakistan and Afghanistan. So that's just an overview of that. Okay, I thought I would go ahead and talk about this rather controversial subject. Whenever you're talking to a Muslim, often the subject will come up, do we have the same God? And some Muslims will say yes, because there's the continuity of your prophets and Jesus, Old Testament, New Testament, then Muhammad abrogated all of that because it was changed and corrupted in transmission. And so they say that the God is the same, but the understanding of the God is not the same. Therefore, we need clarification. Well, Allah has given that clarification in the 600s through Muhammad, the Prophet. Okay, so now other Muslims will say it cannot be the same God. Utterly impossible to be the same God. Because look what you've done with that God. You have so distorted the teaching of that God that it can't even be called the same God. And so they go back and forth with that. But if you look at the Quran, basically I think you'll find that from their side, it is okay, same God. And from basically the Christian side these days, they say, how could ever they be the same God when they have so distorted the concept and teaching of God? Okay, so then to look at this, Julie and I were one time coming to think about the revelation of the one true God, and where do we go with this issue that comes up in our face when we're dealing with Muslims, and also dealing with other Christians, say in your church, or where you go to present your future ministry. They might be asking this question, is it the same God? This is just common. So we were working on this, and we thought we'd graph God. That's really kind of way out, but we thought we would try to think through God in a graph form. Okay, the revelation of the one true God. We're trying to think of revelation now to try to get to who God is. We're trying to work it through at revelation point. So if we say, put God in the middle and say half of God we don't understand, nobody understands this, it's shrouded in mystery. So that's the hidden mysteries of God. And then down here we have number one, teaching about God, and we're going to work with Islam and Judaism and Christianity, the three major monotheistic religions, right? So we'll take Islam, Judaism, Christianity. Number one then, these issues right here are common to all three religions. I've just picked out some stuff, okay? Mercy, judgment, omnipotence, faith requirement, eternal life, strictly monotheistic. Incidentally, I've been doing this study on mercy and grace and whether there's a difference between them biblically and in Islam. I think Islam, well, they don't use grace much at all. They use mercy. Mercy is their word, right? It's embedded in some of their very basic statements. So, but we looked at it from the Old Testament, New Testament usage, how many times it was used. We find that mercy and grace, whole Bible numbers, the numbers that come out, is about the same. Well, about 200 times, a little over, for mercy, 200, a little bit more times for grace. So which was more used in the Old Testament? Which word? Mercy. New Testament would be grace. Now, do grace and mercy show up in passages in the New Testament together, same verse? Yes or no? Yeah. Any number of times, grace and mercy be upon you, peace be upon you, and all this type of thing. So there are those people who want to make a distinction between the grace and the mercy, but it's, in all sense, the bottom line, it's undeserved recipients of God receiving that which we don't deserve, okay? So with Muslims, now we're back to how we approach Muslims, I always use their word, mercy, because I think it has enough of the same connotation that I'm not worried about it, trying to explain to them grace. Okay, so I was just going off on this word mercy here. Now, so those things then, and you could pick out others, and you could do an exegesis on each of those, but that wasn't my interest. My interest is just to find some commonalities. So those are there. Then number two, teaching about God, common in belief to Christianity. Now we take out Islam and put it in Judaism, Christianity and Judaism. And here's Judaism, here's Christianity. I just picked out biblically based Old Testament prophets, creation, 10 Commandments, prominence of Psalms, and inerrancy. Okay, so the third one is teaching about God exclusive to Christianity, and here it is. New Testament revelation, views, sin, forgiveness, resurrection, atonement, and Jesus as God. So those would be distinct things. All right, now if we're saying that there is but one God, I mean, whether we got it right or got it wrong, these religions, each of them saying absolutely one God. Now Muslims think we have 3 gods, but that's another issue. Okay, we'll decide on that on Friday and have a definitive answer to that. But for now, we're just looking at God concepts. So all of us say one God. And then the question is, what do we do with it when, particularly Islam and Christianity? So we look at Judaism. Now, question. This is not a trick question. Do the Jews worship the same God as the Christians? Yes or no? Struggling with that? Do Jews worship the same God as Christians do? I think you better say yes, or CIU won't let you pass this course. Yeah, it's the same God. Okay? Now, next question. Are Jews going to heaven when they die if they don't become Christians? No. All right, so now you got people who believe in one God, the same God as Christians do, and yet they're lost because they haven't accepted Jesus as Lord and Savior. Okay? So then the follow-up question is, if you have these people who definitely worship the same God and are lost, can we not have then Muslims, also who worship the one God, same God, if you want to go there, same God, but are lost because of what? Because of understanding, because of the exegesis of the concept of God. The whole understanding of what we put into the word God is so important that some people will be lost even though they are the same God as the Christians. They'll be lost because of what they've done with that, how we have taken Jesus. We say we have truth, and we have worked it out, and same God as Jews, but we're saved and they're lost. Now, so then we have Muslims as another group of people. Can we not say they have the same God as we, but because of inadequacy in understanding that they are lost as well as the Jews, but we're not putting them in a new God category. They're in the same God category as Jews, as Christians. This explanation would probably go down with most Muslims okay, saying, but we're right and you 2 guys are wrong. We're saying we're right and those 2 guys are wrong. But does our interpretation of God change God in essence, in Genesis, in who he is? No. Okay, now do you want to come back on that? Because you don't have to agree with that. I have had some people extremely upset with me because of this little graph that I am so bold as to say it looks like there's a good possibility that the God of Islam and the God of Christianity are the same. Now let's go on to just briefly the linguistic side. Allah. Okay, so we like to use a heathen word from Northern Europe, Gad or Gat, and which we made into a really good biblical God in English. But that English word did not come from the Bible. It came from Northern European idolatrous gods. But we're okay with that because we have taken a linguistic word, put meaning into it that's biblical. We've sanctified it. We use it. We don't have a problem with it, even though the first part of that word was very inadequate. Now, Allah, we have a very intimate friend who is Syrian and Lebanese, has dual passport. And Riyad Kassis and his wife are just beautiful, beautiful people. And we're going to spend 2 weeks vacation, or 1 week vacation with him in September because he's on sabbatical here in the States. And Riyad worships Allah all the time because as a Middle Eastern Christian, following the Bible, there is no other word for God. There is no other word but Allah. I have a nice, beautiful thing they gave me over my desk in Charlotte, embedded with something like ivory, but it says, Allah bless our home. And they gave that to me, and that's very meaningful to them, very meaningful to me. But many people who haven't walked through this just hear that word Allah, and they don't think about all the Middle Eastern Arab Christians who have no other word, or House of Believers in Nigeria, or Indonesians and Malaysians who also use Allah frequently. And so the linguistic side, usage, is broad among born-again biblical Christians and nominal Christians in those countries who have nothing else to say but for God except Allah. So that's the linguistic side. And so we have poured in biblical content. So Syrian or Lebanese or North African Arabs, when they say the word Allah, they are not thinking Islamic theology. They are not. They're thinking biblical theology, right? So that takes care of the linguistic side as far as I'm concerned. I'm not hung up with the word Allah. But you will meet Christians in America that are super hung up on the word Allah because they haven't followed this through. Okay, so that's that side. Now we're back to this side and your comments. All right, I think we probably dealt with that, and